welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math in the Upshaws. We're going to talk about the Upshaws. We're going to talk about the comedy. We're going to talk about math behind that. And we're also going to talk about the different elements both in universe and on that meta level and how math is used along the way. And we'll talk about my feelings about the show. And for the record, I like the show, and I'm going to get into why and go from there. So we're going to have fun. Assume that there are spoilers ahead. With that in mind, let's get into it. And again, spoilers ahead. Okay, so with the Upshaws, it's a really funny show. It's also a show that will hit you with some real shit. Um, and you won't always be ready for it, but it's good, and I dig that. And as far as the comedy is concerned, when it comes to a joke in general, it's something that's inherently mathematical. You have the setup plus the punchline, and that is equal to the joke. And you can play around with that formula. You can get subversive with it if you will, but that is the essence. And part of that depend like how you deliver that, right, is key, right? And that will depend on the situation. You might have something that is more like physical and slapstick. You might have something that is just said, something that is written, something that's just largely visual in some larger scale and scope. There was a better way to say that, but my whole thing is just like you could have any number of things contribute to how a joke is delivered. It could be multi-layered, you know, and it could also combine different types of joke telling, right? But the idea is it ends up being something that's inherently mathematical. And when you're thinking about the joke and you're thinking about the scene, you have your actors, you have their locations, you have the motions that they're doing. If it's spoken, you have the words that they're saying. And not only is there math and that general idea of sound and how it's being used, there's that idea of their breathing and their pacing and their timing with the joke. And if there's something more physical in nature, you have more than just the characters to consider, right? You have the different elements of the environment and how everything comes at you, and how it's supposed to come at you. And if there's something that might need stunt people involved, that's a thing, right? And as far as the Upshaws is concerned, they hit you with a lot of jokes. And there's math in how that gets across to you, and then of course personal taste with how that hits, but you can see where the joke is. And I think that's cool. And so while you're considering it, there are things like I said, like you're considering the actors, you're considering their not only the voices that they're using and the breathing, but their positions, angles taken, that sort of thing. And then of course you have your set and where the characters are to each other in relation to that set. The dimensions of the set, how big is it, how it was constructed. All of that is math, right? And math is used to construct all of that. Then you have the idea of how it's filmed and what it's filmed on, and just being able to be able to do all that. And then there's the lighting, the sound, design, and the idea of editing everything all together. There's math in all of that and contributing to the show. And then with the Upshaw, it's like, yes, you get a bunch of jokes, but you also get some real topics thrown in. So it's like, well, how do you deliver all that? And there's math in deciding when you're gonna make those jokes land or when it's time to get serious. And I dig it. And there's a whole lot of talent involved in this show, right? Like just to give you an example of the heavy hitters, you have Mike Epps is Benny, Wanda Sykes is Lucretia, and Kim Fields is Regina. Um, and so just those three alone, it's like there's a lot of just talent there. Um, and there's a lot of other characters too, like the children characters and characters that are in the community and at work and at school and all that stuff. But special shout out to Gabrielle Dennis because she's great, highly talented. She plays Tasha in the Upshaws, and I first recall seeing her back in Blue Mountain State, and then she was also in the game, but also in things like Luke Cage as well. And every time I've seen her, she's play something different. And then a Black Lady sketch show, she's playing a million characters in that. But yeah, she's good, and I'm glad that she's in the show. And it seems like she has fun playing Tasha, and I dig that. And so you have just like a whole lot of talent in that show, and they also like touch on a bunch of real things, like I said, because some of it is dynamics. It's just like, hey, with Gabrielle Dennis's like character Tasha, for instance, like Benny has a kid by her that he had when he was separated by his wife, but not divorced, right? And that complicates things. But another big thing is like money and, well, math and that, right? And that's math that affects us all. And so they get into that a lot, right? Whether it's like money and how you're using that as far as the home is concerned, or misusing it, whatever the case may be in a situation with from different characters. But also like the money and like running a business. For instance, like with Benny, he has an auto shop, and so it's like, well, hey, that takes money to run. And so you get into that in different financial situations, and I dig that because like it touches on some real stuff. It's also math in action. It's math that we could all relate to, because you're dealing with money, you're dealing with math, you're dealing with livelihood, you're dealing with food, you're dealing with a lot of different things. And it's like, yeah, so you can't really get around money without math. And again, it's math that affects us all. In any case, I like the Upshaws. It's a really funny show, and again, it touches on some real stuff, and it's black led, and that's nice because like there's not a lot of shows out there with that happening. But it's like you get some here and there, and I think the Upshaws does a really good job of presenting a whole bunch of things, right? Like a whole myriad of topics, and I dig it. And I do recommend seeing it because it's a really funny show. So there's any number of things that I can continue to talk about, but it's just like, so it's a show that's still going. It's around 50 episodes at this point. They've been cooking, and they have some war coming up before it all ends, as far as I could tell. Um, and I, for one, plan to see it through. That's a great show. I'll see you in the future.